Okay, now,
Nice coiffure.
usually when we talk about the plagues, we go to Shmot. These parshas are that, these 2 or 3 parshas that deal with the Makot, that deal with the plagues. But I'm going to start with Devarim and not with Shmot. Now, what does Devarim have to do with the plagues? If you read carefully the text, especially at the end, there was Meir's Bar Mitzvah Parsha, but in the curses, there's about 50 curses. And in that depiction of curses, the text indicates that if Klal Yisrael doesn't keep Torah and Mitzvot, they'll have all these things upon them. Included in those things are 4 words that are like the plagues. There's a place where it says Dever, and then in chapter 28, 21 to 46. There's a place where it says Dever. There's a place where it says Shchin. There's a place where it says Arba, and there's a place where it says Choshech. So the natural question is, what are they referring to? They seem to be telling you these things are natural things that Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, could bring on Mitzrayim, on the Jewish people, if they don't keep the mitzvot. But the question becomes then, they use 4 words that are in the 4 of the plagues that go by that name in Shemot. And the natural question is, where are the rest? When I was working on this text, I said, it hits you. I mean, anybody who knows the material, if it says Shchin, well, one of the Makot will come into his head. I mean, that's automatic. So the question then became, for me, where are the other 6? Okay, 4 were mentioned, where are the other 6? Okay, now, in this parsha, when you read it, you'll see that there are included here not only those 4 terms, but one-time words in the Chumash text. One-time words in the Chumash text. Here, on Pasuk 22, right? You have over there 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 terms, which are one-term usages. They don't appear anywhere else in Nach. They don't appear anywhere else in Nach. They'll appear in Kadachas, whatever it is, Uvacharachar, and so forth. These 4 or 5 terms are one-time words, which makes it very difficult to get understanding of what they mean. Because as you know, in Torah, there's a fantastic interrelation and association range of words. So a word appearing in one context can carry one meaning, but if you look up, and now today we have the tools to do it, you press a button, you get all the places where it says the word, and you look at the context and you get associations and insights that come from this methodology. Well, when you have one-time words, you're stuck. There was a guy who was giving a lecture not Yakar, the other place there, on Pierre Koenig, and he said he talked about the dress Pardes. The dress. He was a big biblical guy from the university, and he was talking about Esther, about the queen for Shlomo Melech. And there's a description of her dress, what she wore. And again, there are one-time words. And so he was stuck for years. He never understood what are you going to tell the students? I mean, So I went home, and it happened to be the last class. It was a series that he gave. I went home, I took my crazy dictionary of the hieroglyphic roots, and I spent a couple of hours and I worked out what the meaning of those terms were. And they were all having to do with the way she looked, the dress. So there was like a breastplate and this and that, different aspects of the dress. And it was the next to the last session. So when he came in the next week, I gave him I said, here's a present for you. As a thank you for giving the course. I learned a lot and so on. So, okay. And I said, here's your answer to the problem, the question. What clothes was she wearing? You know, was she wearing a crown and what was it made of? Anyway, I gave it to him and I never heard from him. I wrote him a note and asked if he ever looked it up. He said no. It got lost in his briefcase. So he never put it out. I'm not doing nach in that respect, so it's just gone. But I did tell the guy that this was, I told him how I got it and so on and so on. Okay, so to make the story short, I took these words, with those questions in mind, I took these words, and I did the usual analysis of taking a term, trying to find the root. What's the root? And then what are the prefixes, what are the suffixes, and what's the root? Remember, the root is always a two-letter root. For this hieroglyphic base, the language is built on two-letter roots, but it has prefixes and suffixes, and sometimes a letter in the middle, but always it's built on two-letter roots. That's one of the great features of the whole story, which means, in principle, the biblical Hebrew runs on 244, whatever it is, 22 times 22, that's the lexicon. And some are not in use. He tells you, that some are not in use at all. So you have 400, 20 times 20, okay, being enough. So that's it. That's the lexicon of the language. And everything else is derived from these roots. That's the power in the language. And I said I did enough, at least 1,000 words and names and places, to take it as a given. The burden of exposition is on somebody who says, no, yeah, he can do some other thing. A lot of the roots that have come down as three-letter roots in Torah by the grammarians of Ibn Ezra and so forth have in them, on analysis, a linkage to the two-letter root. It's not that we have two different worlds. The world of Ibn Ezra and the grammarians dealt with three-letter root, and then this, or even Shimshur for Herschel later on had a two-letter root system and so on. It's not to say that they're totally disconnected, because as you work with one, you take the dictionary, and you look it up and so on, you'll see the kinds of overlap that come from the base. Okay. So I made an analysis. I'm not going to do anything tonight with the analysis, neither of the plagues nor of this. I want to get to a larger frame to discuss a number of things. Okay, so you can take my word for it. When I made this analysis, of course, having a hypothesis, I came in with since it mentioned four, by regular name, Dever. Dever's in the Chumash and the Shemot story. So I came in already with an entry, not just from pure scratch, like Edison looked for the filament of the bulb. You take a list of materials, try one, try another, and you get finally something that glowed. That's not science, but it's common sense and trial and error, and that's a methodology that sometimes works. Okay, so I made this analysis. Lo and behold, I'll never forget, because it was such a powerful thing. It was mincha times that I live across the street from Mechon Meir. I breezed over and get out of the house. I couldn't look at the book anymore. It was just too powerful. What did I find? What I found was that when you analyze the words, there are 10, shall I say 9, not 10. There are 9 plagues, including those 4, so there are 5 more, whatever. And furthermore, they have a pattern. When you look at the order that's in the Chumash, not my order, because I could have switched them around, the order that's in the text indicates that they refer to the plagues, But there's a pattern here in Dvarim, which is the first two plagues, the first two makot of the first set of 3, the second two makot of the second set of 3, and the third of the third set of 3. So there's 9 plagues, 3 in each, and in this Devarim piece, lo and behold, it blew, I went crazy. There was a pattern. It took the first 2 of each set, and then at the end took the third of the first, third of the second, third of the third. What it was the pattern? The pattern turned out to be the places where it says hardening Paro's heart.
Oh.
In the text, if you look at the Makot, the places where it says, turns out to be that. And so, this account in Dvarim, regardless of what it said and how it understood things, it is referring to the plagues with a pattern that cannot be b'mikra. That's not by chance. A lot of other things, you could make a judgment and have a weaker or a stronger judgment as to the, the understanding package. But here, or whether it's chance or not, when you find something like that, 9 items arranged in a pattern, like I went to Mincha because I kind of get out of the house. I was crazy. I just walked across the street to Macom Meir and I bugged up a couple of guys in the basement. They said, "You're crazy as hell," and that was the end of the story. Okay, but that's obvious. All right. So you just take my word for it that, like in the big Perush, I gave the analysis of these words, so the reader can see the linguistic analysis of it. Okay. Okay, now, there are some ramazim, some hints in this Dvarim account that we are talking about the plague. Because the word hikah, Hashem caused damage, hurting Yisrael. The word hikah is 3 or 4 times in this account. And that's the same word for makah. So the word hikah is in the plagues. There's a word, I think somewhere it talks about the niflaot. But interestingly enough, in this account, there's no mention of nes, of miracle. These plagues, and incidentally, in Shmot, there is no mention of the word miracle, nes, in the description and analysis of the plagues in these parashiyot.
In the entire Chumash.
Oh, okay.
The entire Chumash, there's no.
Well, I was going to look it up, but
actually, in all of Tanakh,
no,
I'm not sure.
Very, 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 very few, if any. You're right. I mean,
Nes is a banner. Nes is Nisayon.
Right.
Nisa.
But not Nes miracle.
I don't think so. At least
I
I'm
think
sure
you're right.
Chumash, maybe in
if
all
so,
of Tanakh.
very, very few. I didn't. I was going to look it up, and I was doing something else. I didn't look it up just to tell you about the thing. But in the story, in the Makot, they're called niflaot, wonders or whatever, but not nes. The word doesn't.
There's a label.
And so,
Flag.
and so, right. And the famous one is. Oh, be careful of that one; it will fall apart.
No. Amiyek.
It'll well.
Fall and not the
You'll have to pick up the pages on the floor. But anyway.
Play for me.
But anyway, there's no notion like that. Nes. Okay, in a restricted sense, this is the Egyptian text. The dictionary. In a restricted sense, nes, and this is an easy one because it's 2 letters. So the word nes is the root. I mean, that's, you don't have to figure out the prefixes and the suffixes and the you have it, the base root, nes. Nes, every idea of vacillation, agitation, literally as well as figuratively. That which wavers, which renders uncertain. In a restricted sense, a flag, an ensign, the sail of a ship. In a broader sense, a movement of irresolution, uncertainty. From the idea of flag develops that of putting in evidence, raising. From the idea of irresolution, that of tempting and of temptation. Here's a beautiful example of the lexicon, how it operates here. Here's a group of words that if you look in the dictionary, eventually you will be able to reconstruct that they form a family. If you have a thesaurus and you cross, you'll see that they form a family. But strictly speaking, these are different words. Like I'm doing the Megillah, so to eradicate means one thing, to kill means something else, to destroy means something else, and so on. But when the roots are fundamentally the same, you will find them falling into a group. Wittgenstein, incidentally, called that family resemblance. And when he's talking about the nature of language, that language organizes itself in terms of family resemblance, not exactness, but similitude, a certain similarity, which is not the same as identity. It's not the same. It's not the same as total difference. In any event, okay. Here's the linguistic base. Where's the word miracle? What in this account here? What in this little description that I read indicates anything to do with miracle? Want to take a guess? Because there is something.
Maybe read it again.
There is something. And I want to, at least you'll get this point, if nothing else. But this is an important point because it clears up, from the linguistic point of view, this fundamental term, nes. Okay, so what I read it again. I emphasized it before. Every idea of vacillation, agitation, literally as well as figuratively, and so on and so on, that which wavers, which renders uncertain. A movement of irresolution, uncertainty. You could see how nes. You could see yourself how the word nes, at some time, that's Ferroni research, at some point took on the meaning of miracle. Why? Why? Because when you have an ordered law, a rule, it's predictable. It's relatively certain. We don't say absolutely certain. Only in mathematics and logic do you have what's called absolute certainty. In ordinary thing of everything else, there's relative certainty. Indeed, we work on probability. And if you have on the backdrop of uncertainty, relative certainty in terms of predictability, then something that's lamala, that's higher than predictability, takes on the meaning of uncertainty, and then very easily moves into the notion of nisim.
So you're saying the actual makot, so being out of nature, they're
well, the makot are not. The makot are not. No, they're not nes because that's not. There's no term there in the text that calls it nes. I'm only giving the linguistic basis. If it's uncertainty as one of the meanings of the root, one could see how the association of the mind could put together the uncertainty, which is a root, part of that family resemblance meaning of nes, and one could see if you put it on the backdrop of something that's relatively certain, so you could say, well, something that's has this a high degree of uncertainty is what we call a miracle. Or in ordinary terms for us, we call it chance. If it has a very low probability, something has a very low probability, we call it chance, which is the same basic idea of the thing. Okay, so this is just an aside about the text. There's no mention of nes in the basic story of the plagues, and there's no mention of nes in the Dvarim piece. But Derech Agav, you should know that this Dvarim piece, for me, is crucial and fundamental, because in this piece of the curses, it does not follow the pattern in Vayikra. This pattern of the curses is brachot and klalot, arur, and so on, bracha, baruch, and in this one, you have baruch and arur, and then there's about 50 curses with no comparable brachot. And I showed that these, if you analyze these 50 descriptions, okay, of what will happen to Yisrael if they don't do the mitzvot, it turns out that it's reasonable to conclude that Moshe Rabbeinu made a projection from his time into the world of the prophets, and he didn't like what he found. That's my addition. That's not in the text. All I could show in the text was that it makes reasonable sense to say that this text is not talking about going into Canaan. Moshe Rabbeinu, in his final speech, took the opportunity to talk about what Yisrael will be, what Yisrael will look like in the period of the kings and the prophets. I could show that in the text. So this piece in Dvarim is very crucial to the whole understanding of the Torah system, the Chumash, and what comes further. And one of the points is exactly this. For example, you'll come from afar. Remember, in the kings and Shlomo Melech's period, Israel entered into a big world of international politics, of money, commerce. I mean, this was not 1500 BC. 800 BC, 700 years later, was a entry of Yisrael into the world. I mean, the big world. And so they talk here about nations will come from afar and will hit you and will strike you. Okay? Nations will come whose language you don't know. Well, when you start to put these things together, you see, what do you mean language you don't know? Moshe Rabbeinu, everybody who lived in this Near Eastern area and was educated knew the Akkadian and knew some Egyptian, and there were a group of cognate languages that was part of the orientation. So when you analyze these 50 curses, you see that it's very reasonable to conclude that here Moshe Rabbeinu was talking in terms of the future. My construction is he didn't like what he saw. But I tell the reader that's not in the text. That's coming from a construction on the text. Because there's no indication here, there's no indication that he's talking about that period either. But that's in the analysis that I made of the things that he mentions. Okay? And so I tell the reader I made a construction that he didn't like what he saw. Primarily because the whole system that was in Moshe Rabbeinu took on a theological veneer in the prophets. It wasn't dealing with life directly, as I say Moshe was. It was dealing with life as the fundamental property of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So you had to relate nothing. Hashem was always in the middle of everything. You had to relate to life via Hashem, who commanded Chai Bahem. In other words, everything had a two-step. Instead of a one-step, it was a two-step. Everything was mediated. Everything in experience was mediated by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And my guess is that either then or later, the word Nes and Nisim came into vogue, and eventually what came down as basic to Judaism was the notion of Nisim. Okay, so this very important piece, there's a very important chapter in thing. In historical terms, which I just bypassed, but in historical terms, the whole Sefer Dvarim was written in that period of the kings and the Sofrim and so on, and came down as part of 8th century BC. Historically, that fits the picture. Indeed, if I didn't know that, that's the common view, I would have more or less ground to stand on than that Moshe Rabbeinu was making a projection. I didn't call it a nevuah. He didn't talk about nevuah here. He made a projection based on things that he saw in his time. It wasn't that he did from nothing. 1500 BC was not primitive world. 1500 BC in this area had kingdoms. I read a lot of the Chachmas Yisrael literature, and they indicated how there were kingdoms here in Mesopotamia, there were great societies here. It wasn't like a shepherd watching the flock. It wasn't in this nomadic frame. There's plenty of that. But basically, there was civilization, advanced civilization. And so Moshe Rabbeinu didn't start from, like, to talk about bureaucracy, too much, fakerai, it's in the news, and too much bribing and everything else. He didn't have to say, well, I got it out of the blue, He saw it in his time. I mean, in his time there was corruption in government in Egypt and other places. Somehow one would say it's built into the nature of politics that in certain respects you cut corners. Okay, so this is the analysis of miracle.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Maybe you're going to cover this, but ot, mofet, niflaot, those package of words are, first of all, are any of those used in conjunction with the makot?
Yeah, sure.
So
Sure.
maybe.
Sure. From the positive side, yeah, it had nothing to do with nace, but it did have to do with niflaot, wonders, and so forth and so on. What that means is open. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But okay. I mean, I even forgot what I wrote in the book. In the Perush book, I discussed all these terms and showed that they fit together in terms of a package. You'll see what I mean right away when I give you the analysis. Okay, so the next step is, after we had this linkage and this association and the side about nace, which I think is a very important point, how it grew out of this lack of certainty. Okay, we come now to the makot. Now we come to Shmot. What is this all about? So the first point to understand is the Egyptian Chartumei Mitzrayim duplicated one makah. So to say that they were at a level of Moshe Rabbeinu, Nevuah, whatever you want to say, and they got 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 9, begs the question. What are you talking about? This is Avodah Zarah society, of Chartumei Mitzrayim. What are you telling me? That they duplicated 1 plague? They had the same power as Moshe Rabbeinu for 1 plague? Okay, you could say that. Then you have to now make your argument. How are we supposed to take that? How are we supposed to understand the picture? Then we have the refrain 3 times of hardening Paro's heart. What does that mean? Okay, so as some of you have heard before, I had this crazy speculation that this story is a credential story. Just like in Avraham Avinu, the first story about Paro, going down to Paro and she's my sister, that was a credential story. It's like, because by a different marriage she was related. Sarah was related to Avraham. But it was like coming with a puzzle to Paro. Who's Avraham? Who's Avraham? He's a 0 compared to what's going to Paro. I mean, he's dealing with Egypt. Melech Mitzrayim. It's a credential story. It's like coming in with a quiz question and knowing that the guy will flumfer. He'll say one thing, but he'll give you the wrong answer, but it sounds very reasonable. So those stories with Yitzchak and with Abraham, those are credential stories. And that's not for now, but I showed that in the analysis of the material. Okay, so there's a credential story. What is the credential? What is the credential? So I was involved in Eliadi's book on yoga. Eliadi was a big guy in the University of Chicago, wrote Sacred and Profane. He was popular in
Murcia?
Huh?
Murcia,
yeah. And he was popular at a time where everybody, you like a common name in university, you had you quoted him and so on. He wrote a number of books. And I happened to be working on his book on yoga. I'm telling you how I got to this whole crazy idea. He was describing the meditation experience and so forth. And one of the things he said was that in meditative states, you hear the croaking of a frog, a noise. You got to remember, what we do in the West, okay, is very far, far, far away from what's done in the Orient for mumkin. For people who understand and know and experience the meditation, it could take 20 to 30 years to make perfection of the techniques. What we have is Hollywood and PR and marketing and so forth. Okay, it plays a role, it has a function in the medical world, but it's not the same thing as what goes on in the real understanding. A second point that I once mentioned, so when you hear the word, like you hear the word frog croaking, well, you know, when I watch television, National Geographic and so on, I don't know, my head is like a magnet when you hear things that all of a sudden something comes into your head, stream of consciousness. Well, then it pays to follow it up and look in. They mention about an animal, and a kangaroo, whatever the animal was. Well, that's important because what came into my head was, oh, in this story, you know, and I'm not a mumcha. I mean, in this story, they did talk about a camel or a kangaroo, and so your mind starts to associate, and sometimes some of the things that they say help you get shot in what's going on. I mean, it's like a magnet. You're drawn to the terms. So here was the case, reading in a book, that's part of the story. Okay, and another thing, B'derech Agav, I mentioned it once before, what gave me the clue to Cain was the idea that Eliade mentioned in a number of places that in the mountains and in special circumstances away from civilization, one of the expressions of being in certain meditative states was to kill somebody.
Was what?
To kill somebody. Now that's not popular, it's not known, but it's in the material that this was an expression. It's like releasing psychoanalytic terms. A guy's in a mental institution and you release the id, you bust through the ego and the superego, and you can have a guy who killed. One flew over the cuckoo nest, you know, with Jack Nicholson. Incidentally, a great film, if you never saw it. It's Jack Nicholson, One Flew Over the Cuckoo Nest. In any event, and then we have a problem in law, whether the person is held responsible, so on. Okay, so that's just an aside about Cain, because then it dawned on me that the story is about killing as an excess of life energy. Killing as a, we'll get back to this in a second when we get to the Bechor at the end of the session. But the point was, this is what triggered off, to me, it says, Kaniti ish et Hashem. Hashem is life, Chaim, tree of life. And Cain had this without bound. No bound that came in from Seichel. No bound that was Elokim. Elokim is Yodea Tov V'Ra. Cain had full life thrust, whatever you want to call it, life energy, whatever you want to call it, without the slightest bound. And that's the pshat of Kaniti Ish et Hashem. In other words, there's no bound.
No conscience.
No conscience, right, exactly. No conscience. And when you work it out in the story, he says, if you work out the psukim, you know, you have somebody asks him, where's my brother? Hevel wasn't the brother. Hevel was a nobody. Brother is already a structure. And so on, so on, so on, so on. In other words, the story is nothing. It doesn't say murder. Roni told me that many times in the Chumash. You know, whenever the first time the word is used, there's usually some indication of the definition of the meaning. The word Retzach does not appear in the story. Now, if it's the first time that there's murder in the world, as everybody takes it to be, it's very reasonable that it should have said somewhere in the account, instead of Harag, which is also used for murder, but it should have said Retzach. That's a linguistic point, but it's not totally zero. There was no Retzach in the story. Well, indeed, if a guy's having meditative state and he kills somebody as an expression of his state of life energy or whatever, well, that's nothing to do with killing somebody. I mean, that's not murder. That's plucking a leaf off a grass when you're walking the street is not murdering the plant. Well, I mean, we don't call it murder, but it's destroying, whatever you want to say. So the story, the Cain story, was not talking about murder. That's a big chiddush, and that changes your whole perspective on how to fit the rest of the story in, about the shepherd and about the agriculture and the Hevel piece. So there's a lot of questions that arise from the beginning point, but I found that I handled them relatively okay, so that it makes it reasonable that this story carries Cain as the highest exemplification of Hashem, of Chaim, beli conscience, like David says. No input. Now, I say there ain't no such being. In reality, there are no such things unless you're mentally ill. Other than that, there are no indications. So this story, like the Gan Eden story, like the Bereshit story, was the Chumash setting up the basic definitions that are going to be worked with in the rest of the text. The fundamental definitions of Hashem and Elohim. I was going to say HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that's Chazal. Chazal used the word HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Another indication, the word Hashem, you look in the concordance and everything, the word Hashem and the word Elohim are very seldom found, if ever, in Chazal. They're talking about the Psukim, when they quote a pasuk. But the basic term was HaKadosh Baruch Hu or Makom. But HaKadosh Baruch Hu being the dominant term, why didn't Chazal stick to the terms? I mean, it's not a high-power argument, but it's certainly suggestive that they had something that they wanted to, in one sense, hide, and in another sense, say, why don't the reader ask, why are we talking about HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Why are we talking about Hashem and talking about Elohim? Or when they talk about Din and Rachmim, right? Elohim is Din and Hashem is Rachmim. It's so obvious. The text says, if you eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, you'll be like Elohim. You'll dare Tov Ra. The other half is, if you eat from Eitz HaChaim, you'll be like Hashem. Chaim. I mean, why did they hit Rachmim? So one could say, well, of course, Rachmim is a subset of Chaim. Indeed, it's the feminine, it's the woman, Rechem. And Chazal, in a way, were telling you, at least one could read it that way, that, why don't you ask a simple question? Why are we saying Rachmim when we should have said Chaim? So again, from the outside, are not supportive in the full sense, because these are terminological things, and some are more substantive than others. However, they build up to a picture. And in the story, it changes your whole understanding of the Gan Eden story, which is so central to, even for the Rambam and everything, for medieval Jewish philosophy. It was central. And the understanding that the first story is Elohim, no Hashem, the creation story. The origin of the universe question was the occasion for making a construction built on Elohim, with no bound coming in from Hashem. No, the Seichel made complete construction. Now for us, for experiential persons, there is no such thing as Seichel that's not in what I call a feeling, actional field. And there's no feeling which is not in a Seichel actional field. In other words, there are dominances. There are dominances, but there's no absence. So everyone is like male or female, but everybody has every man has a female dimension. But the male, for most men, is dominant. And so you have the feature. Okay, so so there's a question of relative dominance, but not absence. And that's very big in the Kabbalah. The Kabbalah system builds on these dominances. Okay? Okay, so we come back now to the understanding of the plagues. So what were the credentials? What is Moshe Rabbeinu going to show Paro to tell him, look, you better listen to our God, you better listen to me, I'm a representative. I know things that you don't know. I was raised in Mitzrayim. I knew what you know. I knew the Khartoumei Mitzrayim. But I went to Midian. I escaped. I went to Midian. Midian was on the trade route to the Orient, where the spices and other things came from the Orient. I made a speculation that while Moshe Rabbeinu was in Midian, he learned some things that came from the Far East and were not known to the people who lived in the Near East. Just a construction. So, again, what are the credentials? So Moshe Rabbeinu says, look, you better listen to me because I have 3 domains which you don't have. But, indeed, I recognize that you did have 1/3 of the first. Because your guys, Khartoumei Mitzrayim, duplicated the first. What are these things? In the understanding of the meditation world and these life energy states, this comes from, again, from Eliade, there are 3 basic sets of techniques to achieve transformations, which are supposedly for the better, of life energy, to use the loose term, in the person. There is operational working on the breathing system. There is working on eliminating space, time, motion, causality from consciousness. And there is the blockage of seminal flow. These were 3, this is not me, this is the understanding in the books, that there were 3 basic sets of techniques under 3 headings of breathing, first, seminal flow, backup of seminal flow, that's the second, and the third is the elimination of space-time causality. So when you make an analysis, again with the help of the dictionary, when you make an analysis of the plagues, lo and behold, you see, or at least the plagues and the description, the words used, can reasonably carry this understanding of the plagues, crazy, crazy, crazy though it sounds. And now you're not supposed to think of Pesach, you're not supposed to think of the Haggadah. These are in a frame of halakha, and we're talking now about understanding the story, understanding the material per se, independent of halakha. Halakha goes, we do not, it's a big mistake, we do not paskin anything from the text. We don't paskin, I'm working on Megillah, we don't paskin from the fact that they had grassroots celebration from the beginning, and that in the text Mordechai represents Chazal, and so halakha is a different context. And then that's a separate inquiry. Why did Chazal, when it dealt with the halakha, change certain things, not stick to the text the way it was understood this way? I say, my favorite example is Sitei Mifshol Lifnei Iver. That text means literal, that you're a chicken, what we call you're a chicken. When I see a kid in the street ridiculing a guy who can't go across the street because he's blind, I usually go over to the kid and say, Matan said, you can't see. It doesn't say, in the text, in Vayikra, it says, he lacked Yirat Elokim. That's the phrase. He lacked Yirat Elokim. He didn't have a tov, he didn't have this dimension, what I call basic civility. There are 5 places in Vayikra where it says Yirat Elokim were missing. It doesn't say it by murder, it doesn't say it by stealing, it says it, if you look at the places, it says it when a lot of things are up to the individual, like counting the Yovel, recording which year we're in. That was a personal thing apparently, and the person had to do it. and keep a record on him for himself of the thing aside from what would come down from Bezdin and so on and so on. So there are 5 places where it uses the phrase Yirat Elokim, and not on things that you would say, well, that's not a question of Yirat Elokim. To say and ridicule taking a blind man across the street is a lack of civility, a lack of basic decency. And it's nothing to do with Avera. It's nothing to do with killing somebody, stealing somebody. So we expect, okay, in business, you do this, you do that, so, but it's not a question of basic civility. Basic civility is below the gvul. So when a kid ridicules a guy who's blind crossing the street, for me, that's below the gvul. And I have to mention, the kid's fighting with another kid. I don't usually go and get involved and stop the fight and so on. I mean, so that's kids. I mean, I fought plenty when I was a kid, and you did the same way. But it's not. But this idea of being chicken, being such a lowlife, to use the language, a lowlife that you lack basic civility. Okay, and we could take examples from the sexual world and so on and so on, where you this. Just because you're doing something that's an avera doesn't mean that there's no civility. I mean, the different type things in the human world. Okay. So what we have here, 3 sets of 3. Okay, 3 sets of 3. The breathing system, the seminal flow. Remember, the ones on the seminal flow have to deal with the animal world. If you read it, you'll see that you could be able to start to understand the story. And the third set deal with space, time, and causality. I'm not doing anything tonight of the analysis, but the basic description, given the understanding of the words that are coming in from the Olave, one could reasonably carry, the story can reasonably carry this crazy speculation. That it was a credential story, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, look, you could do one, but you can't do the rest. I'm telling you what you can't do. So the hardening of Paro's heart relates to this situation. In other words, Paro said, in effect, where did you learn it? You were brought up in Mitzrayim. So you should be able to duplicate what the Chartumei Mitzrayim did. How do you, Moshe, come to this? Oh, I was in Midian. I was on the trade route. I picked up information and things that were foreign to the Middle East, but were not foreign to the Far East. Okay? So I picked up things, and again, there's a question about how advanced was the civilization at that time in China, India, and so on. But anyway, that was the basic idea. And so Paro, in effect, said, haha, if you learned them, we can learn them. Now that we know that there are a richer set of meditative techniques and so on, you learned it, I'm going to set up a research program for our guys, for Chartumei Mitzrayim. I'm going to set up a research program for Rockefeller Foundation grant so that we can achieve, our guys, that will achieve the same thing. And that's the analysis of the hardening of the heart. It was based on underneath, the idea was that you could learn it. It's learnable. These are things that are learnable and teachable. We're going to learn. We're going to be at the same level. So when it comes to the 9 plagues, 3, 3, and 3, this is the analysis that holds, where it can be carried by the text reasonably, and the burden of exposition is on somebody else who wants to give a different understanding. And there are a lot of understandings in the literature, in the Mefarshim, about what was going on. They were natural occurrences. There were things that happened in Egypt. And so, like in the Devarim story, it talks, things happened in Egypt. They had locusts, they had things, and so when they happened in excess, this was indicative, this was the Makkah. In other words, there's a naturalistic explanation given for the Makkot, and indeed, I suggest that part of it came from, part of the reason they missed, what I'm talking about is, because they had this. I'm not the first one to see this, though I haven't go look in Rashi and all the Mefarshim. But I can't believe that nobody in all the Mefarshim didn't ask the question I asked, or some variation. Where's the others? Or what are we talking about? Dever. I mean, that comes out of the plague story. So what's it doing here in this story? So it could be that somebody else asked the question, and with that in the mind of it, there's no indication in this story. This is not a credential story. This is a punishment story, that you'll get these makot on you that are natural things in excess if you don't keep the Torah. That's what this story in Devarim is all about. But I'm suggesting that the interpretation, the understanding of that story, if somebody recognizes it, could help give a chizuk and strengthen the naturalistic interpretation of the makot. That these things were unusual natural events, and not constructions that represent components of these three meditative type states. Mine is a construction. Mine is a construction based on linguistic analysis of what the words carry. And when you show that they can reasonably carry life energy, states, transformation, whatever you want to call it, well then at least it's not crazy. It's not, it has a base. It has a basis. The disturbing part, like many things, is in Chazal. When we take Pesach, what would Pesach be with this story? What would Pesach be in terms of Judaism, Yahadut, with this story substituting for the Haggadah and the phrases that are used and the whole orientation? You take any of the big Mefarshim, Maral. How can you can't even think about it. But again, we're not talking about the halacha, we're talking about the understanding of the Sipur in a total different context. That the words and the Sipurim carry themselves, even though what's come down to us doesn't quite fit the story. However, I stand always firm, the halacha is built on Chazal, on Torah Shebiksav and Torah Shebal Peh, and not on the meaning of the story, as indicated by that example in the Sifri. The Sifri says, as halacha on the blind issue, that's a literal statement about the deaf person and a blind person. You have no Yirat Elokim if you ridicule a blind person. He can't ridicule you back. That's cooked chicken. That's degrading. You're below the line of civility. Okay? That's my shot on the text. Yirat Elokim, I built it all up. But the halacha is summa l'chol davar, blind in every respect. Meaning, if you sell something to somebody and he doesn't know some information, there's a halacha about that. If the person can get it, the thing you want to sell from somewhere else, it may be allowed to sell it in. So the sugya, and I learned it in Yakar, it was one of the years that we learned the whole sugya of this issue, and it related to alms, buying alms in some totalitarian countries, and real reality of contemporary world. The halacha deals with priest clothing. If you have clothing and a priest needs the clothes, special clothes, can you sell it to him, and so on and so on. So there's an inyan built on 3 words in the Sifri. Summa l'chol davar. On that 3 words is built a whole fantastic sugya with shailot and chuvot and everything else in the halacha as to what that means, pro, con, details, and so forth. On 3 words, which has nothing to do with the Chumash. It's not... Sure, once you have the orientation to the halacha, yes, it can carry the text when you read it that way, with this veneer. It can carry. It doesn't say, make sure that when I say Sitein Michshol Avnei Iver, I'm talking about a real blind person. The text doesn't say that. So indeed, methodology of Chazal allows this understanding of the widening of the text to carry meanings that need not, I say need not be in, because in many places the meaning is in the text. But in other places, like this one, it's not. So of course you could say, where did you get the idea of Yered Elokim? Where did you get the idea it's below the Gvul? Well, that's experience. What am I going to tell you? I do that with a kid, that's all. And I ask myself, why do I stop the kid? I don't want to get in trouble with a parent. You grab a kid in the playground because he's banging and hitting your kid, then you take you to court. You're in trouble. Okay. Look at the tsuris we're in here with all of this contemporary issues with the child molesting and so on and so on. Okay. So that's the picture here. So what we have is, in summary, we have a indication that this is a credential story. It gets support from this analysis of Dvarim that I gave, and it puts the burden, or at least forces one to ask the reasonability of the whole picture. Okay, I think that's it. I think I covered all the points.
Question about...
Bechor.
What?
Bechor.
I'm not a Bechor.
What happened to the 10th? Our Bechor.
Oh, okay, yeah, well...
The other end of the story,
Okay.
what David wrote was, I wrote 9 plagues, and somebody said, well, the guy made a mistake.
Before the 10th plague?
There are 10, you know. Okay, so that's right. So one thing I missed, that's left over. Right. Good. Okay, so the problem is, why do I say 9 plagues?
3 times 3.
Because in the construction, there are 3 basic techniques, there are 3 subparts of the techniques, and the refrain of hardening Paro's heart is one in each. The third one in each one of them is that.
Could you give an example?
No. No, that's for another thing completely. That's what I said in the beginning.
Take 3 of them and give them...
No, that's what I said in the beginning. I'm not going to give the
Okay.
linguistic analysis of the terms. But I'm just telling you, you can take it on, for the moment, on authority, but of course, in the Perush and the Chumash, and I gave out once a sheet when I gave this talk a number of years ago.
Okay.
I think I gave out a little
I remember
2 or
I have
3
it.
pages on each
Yeah, I got
makah,
stuff.
whatever it was. But anyway, that you can take my word for it that it makes it reasonable. And indeed, there are some problems. The language, I mean, you have to do a lot of bob and weaving, like we say in basketball, or football. We've got to do a lot of wiggling around to get the ball for a touchdown. I mean, I'm coming in with a basic idea, and I'm making a construction. And as I told you many times, the problem is you can't get the usual methodology for the stuff I'm talking about. You can't get the usual methodology of getting support from the psukim. Because the psukim are profit loaded. The psukim, as you know, for most people, are theologically loaded. We're talking about Hashem. Torah talks about God in the language of man. I mean, that's the summary. So I say, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Torah talks about man in the language of God. That shifts your whole... To understand what I'm talking about, you have to be on the way in your own reflections on different things in Torah that come across as problematic, or where you have a certain chush, but you can't quite put it into language or get it across. It's like an asymptotic curve. You have to be, the reader has to be on the way so that he could meet the other guy on the way and join forces by getting material that he didn't know about. Well, at that point where he meets. But if you really have, that's what I call emunah pshuta in another context, and you're not bothered by all the questions, wow, what a level. That's fantastic. And there are people like that, their neshama is not bothered by unknowables, by feeding it things that it can't work with. not every neshama is the same. So if you find a neshama that doesn't have that need, doesn't get involved with that, that's a fantastic level. That's unbelievable. On the other hand, the human being has a mind, and the mind, as you know, is the worst thing that we have and the best thing that we have. Because the mind is the thing that falsifies reality in spades. One of the works of the mind is to falsify reality. And on the other hand, to capture reality, understand it, and so forth. But anybody in psychoanalysis, anybody in the healing field, anybody in counseling will tell you that to work with an intellectual, don't start. Because he's got an intellectual can make rationalizations at the spur of the moment, and those rationalizations are covering up what's bothering the person. In counseling or psychoanalysis, Freud will tell you that, may obey. His patients, the ones that were intellectuals, they were a lot Jewish in the beginning, and the ones that were intellectuals were the worst. I mean, and you learn in your own experience. I learned how the excess of concern with mind of Joe Levinson blocked out, eclipsed other things which had to wait 40 years to become good. Had to wait 40 years to enter into me as a more full person. So the intellect is a great virtue and a great thing, but on the other hand, it can kill. I mean, it has the capacity to distort the reality. Okay, so now we come to the question of the 10th plague. First point is linguistic. If you read the text, you'll see that the language of the Bechor, of the 10th plague, of killing the Bechor, changes. The wording, phraseology, changes from what was standard in the first 9 plagues. If you read the text, you'll see that it changes. And even though the word miracle doesn't come in and so on, it changes sufficiently to indicate, perk up the reader, that, well, maybe it's something in a separate category. Because on the model that I presented is 3, 3, and 3. There's no place for 4. I mean, in the Haggadah we have the 3, 3, and 4, right? But in the construction that we just went through, we have 3, 3, and 3. 3 sets of 3. Okay? So given that construction, it makes the question even stronger to give some kind of an answer to the Makot. It's called Makot B'chorot. But I suggest it's in a different league entirely. And indeed, why weren't there 11 plagues? Why weren't there 12? Why did Mitzrayim go under after the 10th Makkah of Bechorah? So the answer, I think, is something along the following. In the Chumash text, as you know, Torah bypasses the firstborn. Cain, Esav, Yishmael. The Torah bypasses the firstborn and deals with the continuation of the tradition, of the leadership and everything, with the secondborn. Everybody points it out. It's right there in the text. Why is that so? Why is that so? Why do we bypass, why does the Chumash bypass the firstborn and work with the secondborn and build the tradition of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and so on from the secondborn and not the first? Yeah.
I don't want to start a discussion. I just wanted to mention that in primitive culture, I believe the firstborn was always sacrificed.
Was sacrificed. Why was it sacrificed?
Because it was valuable. You give the most valuable thing to God. They sacrificed the first fruits.
Oh, okay. Good point. I mean,
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
No. I'm finished in 5 minutes. Then we can open up for discussion. But the point is that that's a good point. Incidentally, it's not. It has a value. Okay. Now the point is I suggest, when Watson was here, DNA molecule, he gave a lecture in the Hebrew University, and after he finished, you don't usually bug a speaker. I learned that. You could be the greatest guy in the world and the nicest guy. You don't bug him before he speaks, and you don't bug him after he speaks.
Oh, tell that to Freddie.
Because afterward he's unwinding, and before he's, you're going to sidetrack him. Well, you're going to ask him a serious question, So it's not. However, he was down on the podium. He had finished the talk, and there was nobody there. He was just ready to get his coat and go home. I said, "Oh, nobody there." I'll breeze down. I ran down to the front and I asked him. He thought I'm crazy. I said, in the firstborn, male especially, are there any special properties of sexuality, what later develops into sexuality of the male? Are there any special properties of the firstborn, in this domain? Well, he looked at me, I'm crazy, and he said, no such thing in biology. There's no special properties about semen, about this, about that in the firstborn. Okay, that's what he answered. All right, so I said, well, maybe he's right. But the belief at the time was that the firstborn has a higher level in quality and in quantity of life energy, especially related to the sexual. That was the belief. So Mizraim, who was built on Cham, Shem, Cham, and Yafet, Cham represents in the text, in the story, and then as it goes through all the genealogy from Cham, Mitzrayim comes from Cham. Cham was this preoccupation and involvement, excessive involvement with the sexual domain.
The second-born.
Firstborn.
Firstborn.
Ham was the firstborn?
No, I'm not talking about I'm not talking about Cham. I'm talking about in the story.
Oh, okay.
You have Shem, Cham, and Yafet, but Cham is the father of Mitzrayim, and so on and so on.
Even like Reuven. Even like Reuven.
Okay, yeah.
You melted his father's bed.
We always bypass the firstborn.
Yeah, okay.
We always bypass that.
And it says about Reuven, I was just looking at that.
Yeah.
Reshit. Kochi. Ata Kochi, Reshit Oni, Yeter Seid, Yeter Oz. Or Yeter. Yeah.
Okay, right there.
It's all the, these.
Right,
strength.
Right. Energy, strength, and right.
And he was the one that.
Then
it goes on to say, Mishkavei Avicha Az Chilalta.
Yeah.
Yitzuv.
Zalova Mikra. I mean, the things. That's what's so fantastic. As you probe one question, it starts to fan out logically into different things, and then all of a sudden, like you look at this and bingo.
Pachaz Kamayim, it also says.
Yeah.
Like not controlled.
Right. So,
Is that Reuven?
Yeah.
So you see it's what you can't, you got to get the spoils from the text.
So
It's
fantastic. Get this straight. They believed that the firstborn.
Yes.
Had
So I'm saying, if he's right, I leave it open, because until we have, in my terms, a real life system understanding, we have to leave relatively open all these questions about the subconscious, about the conscious world, about the mind. We're babies. We're first beginning in Atchalta de Gola to open up the big guns of experience, the big guns of Torah. In other words, we're in the beginning. I mean, I'm not going to be around, but we're in the beginning. I mean, we're just breaking ground. When I look at the way I'm working, or David, or the other people that are working in this thing, we're breaking ground to introduce a different kind of a frame side by side with the usual frame that we accept as Torah people. So we're introducing, like I said the other day, I was talking to David came here. He wanted me to meet his son, and so you use the terms. I forgot what I want to say. Okay.
Let me get straight. They believe the firstborn
Yeah.
had greater sexual power, greater
Right.
sexual energy.
Right, right. So whether it was true or not, that's the thing. Whether it was true or not, for me, remains open. You know, I even go so far as to say that life after death remains open.
Yeah, okay.
For me, not on religious grounds. We don't know anything about the life system.
Right.
Period. We know very, very little. We're trying the best we can in contemporary medicine to build and so on, but we know very, very little, and so we have to leave some of the questions relatively open until we get some closure.
Right.
And
So-
you get surprises all the time. The only thing I read in the paper, in the Post, is Judy Siegel, who does the science and health page. Linda does the puzzle and reads the news. And does it. So we're getting our money's worth for 163 shekel a month. But the point is, for me, it takes 5 minutes, and not all of hers, but sometimes she has some interesting things.
What was it?
Okay, so
What was the interesting thing she wrote that you're referring to?
I forget.
Oh,
Even the simple thing about putting vitamin D in the milk.
oh yeah.
Vitamin D in the milk is only in the 1%. 3% is no vitamin D addition. The 1% carries a thing. She talked about sleeping with lights on. She talked about the role of darkness. And different, she has this column, and every once in a while she comes up with some things that are news on the scene that you wouldn't think operate. So we're still in the baby world when it comes to what I call theoretical biology. However, we do the best we can on the picture. So where was I?
Firstborn.
Right. So the
Totally
first,
different language, so you get a sense that something else is
Oh, yeah.
going on.
So first premise is that was the belief. So that was intrinsic to the cultures of the day, including Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim was built on the primacy of the excess energy flow as localized in the firstborn.
Better
So,
leggen.
But that lives on through the whole of history, primogeniture.
yeah, a lot of things come out. But this is the basic point. So in Mitzrayim was built on the Bechor. The theology, the whole system was built experientially on the Bechor. And the Chumash says, Yisrael is my Bechor. The unit is not a Yachid. That's the first point. The unit is a collective. That in this thing of Am Yisrael, a collective is the first point, is my Bechor. So Bechor takes on now a non-literal meaning. We're not talking biology. In that phrase, when Yisrael is my Bechor, we're not talking biological, we're talking conceptual. We're talking about that somehow in the system, Shaul Kol Yaakov, he used to talk about plurisystem. It was his term. That the human being is part of a plurisystem, and that has special effects. We capture it in psychological, simplistic terms. When you're in a group, you have different types of behaviors that emerge because of the group being in a group. And when you're a Yachid, you're a different person. You're not exactly the same. There are different features. So he called it plurisystem. So in effect, what the Chumash is telling you is, we're not going according to this. Whatever the reason, whatever the story, we're not going, because if we were to go, there would be no reason why we would take the first one out of the picture. If it was a healthy state, if it was a high-level quality state, we would keep it in. Why would Yahudut, why would Moshe Rabbeinu take it out? So, the first point is, it's Yisrael is my Bechor. And the second point is a speculation which says, along the following line, and then we can stop for discussion, along the following line, that this 10th plague, hit at the core of Mitzrayim. We killed the core, the essential theological and experiential core of Mitzrayim. And the first point is, Yisrael is my Bechor. And I think the second point is that there's a difference between the efficacy of working with a person who is really energy soaked and trying to put controls on it because it needs balance. He's not going to be like Cain. He's going to be partially like Cain, but not fully. Cain is a construction, as I said. But you need a putting balance on both sides. If the person has a dominance of seichel, he has to be taught how to put his seichel in a feeling, actional field. And if the person has a dominance on strong feelings and emotion and sexual and so on, so on, so on, the task is how do we put him in bound by adding some seichel, by adding some tov and ra. So I speculate that it could be, this I'm open for discussion, it could be that working with the person who is really dominated by strong feelings and passion gives you less likely of success in achieving a balance than working the other way around. That's just a speculation. But this is basically my answer to the question of the 10th plague. It's not part of the systematic because it's 3, 3, and 3. It bypasses the firstborn. Egypt was built on the firstborn, and here Torah is built on Am Yisrael. We'll call it in Shaw's language a Wuri system. Okay, now I cover.